Hi all. We are going to go over 4.2 Day 2 homework. So if there are questions that you didn't understand, listen. If you need to fast forward just to check answers, and if you got it right, move on. That is absolutely fine with me. If you're still a little confused on any of this though, you should be listening to the explanation, okay? 4.2 Day 2, we started in class, right? We set each one up. Here's the first one, and again, I'm not gonna go verbatim through everything, but I will highlight some things on it since we already talked in class about the setup, okay? Side angle side, remember we marked reflexive on this one. So that gives me a side angle side. First pair of sides right here, given. Angles right here, given. And then the segment that was shared BD, and you probably have BD congruent to BD, which is fine, and then reflexive property. And then last step, triangles are always congruent, okay? This one we talked about midpoint, splits a segment into two equal parts. That's why we marked AX and GX. And that's also why we marked NX and RX, okay? Because of the midpoint. And then we can always mark vertical angles, so we marked our vertical angles. It's another side angle side, okay? So down the side of your paper, you should have side angle side. First step when we do our proofs, we need any non-congruencies. This statement right here is considered to be a non-congruency. It's very important information, but it's not telling me two sides are congruent or two angles are congruent. So that's my first step. Just given. And then we need a pair of sides. Again, we marked AX and GX because of the midpoint. So AX congruent to GX, definition of a midpoint. Okay? Angles. We mark the angles at X. Those are vertical angles. Make sure you use 3 letters to name it. I'm correcting some of the work that I've seen. A couple instances where you're just saying angle X congruent to angle X. Doesn't work. They're in different locations, so you do have to use 3 letters. So angle AXN would work. And then GX, this is an R, if you can't read that, by vertical angles. Next pair of sides, NX and RX. And again, it was because of that midpoint, right? And if you're using information because of a midpoint, that's your reason. Definition of a midpoint. And then last step, triangles are congruent by side angle side. Okay. 21 I left up to you. In construction, roof trusses, bridges, anything like that, you need to have congruent triangles. And if you have one that's off a little bit, it affects the integrity of the building and doesn't last as long. Maybe it still lasts 25 years. But it was built to last 100, 200 or so years. So it compromises the safety and the structural integrity of the building. This one should be side angle side. This one's an NEI because you only have 2 sides, right? And we need either another side or another angle. And I didn't add that part on here, because it says what other information would you need. If we wanted to do side, 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 then I would want YD congruent to KT. Or if I wanted side, angle H congruent to angle P. 26 is just a side, side, side. That's it. All right, flip to the back. Ooh, top one. I sketched it out. Whenever you don't have a diagram, draw a picture. Mark everything you know. And when we look, are those 2 triangles congruent? I do have 2 sides and an angle, but my angle is not in the right spot. This would be side, side angle. That's not one of our options. The angle is not the included angle. So this would be not enough information to decide. All right, bisects split into 2 equal parts. That's why we marked this angle at G, because angle JGM was bisected. GJ and GM were given, and then we have our shared side at GK. And hopefully you're at the point, vertical angles, shared side, we can mark those and use those in our proof. First step, our non-congruency. So GK bisects angle JGM, given. And then we're going to use side angle side, right? So first step, pair of sides. I chose the ones that were given right there, JG, or GJ and GM, given. And then our angles, we did the angles at G. Again, you have to use 3 letters. If they're at G, make sure G's in the middle. If we trace them out, we have JGK and MGK. And the reason we marked them is because of the angle bisector. So definition of a bisector. GK is a shared side. It's on the top triangle, bottom triangle. If you picture pulling them apart, same segment, right? So that same segment we can use as reflexive. Last step, triangles are congruent by side angle side. All right, this one. We have bisect again, except we have segment bisectors, and that's okay, right? Segment bisector is going to give me 2 congruent segments. That's why we marked AC and EC and BC and DC, because the 2 longer segments split each other in half. And then we also have our vertical angles, which gives me a side angle side. First step, that non-congruency, AE and BD bisect each other. Step 2, AC and EC. Here's AC and EC. We mark them because that segment was bisected, so definition of a bisector. Vertical angles, again, make sure you use 3 letters. And then our other pair of sides, DC and BC, was also because of the bisector. And then last step, triangles are congruent. Okay, this one. You do need to recognize parallel. We'll use that a little more upcoming. When you have parallel lines, look for alternate interior or corresponding. On this one, we have alternate interior, lower angle at K, upper angle at F, shared side, KF is on both, and then we were given LK and GF. So that gives me a side angle side. First step, our non-congruency. Parallel doesn't mean congruent, right? So that's our first step. FG congruent to KL. That's given to us. Angle, I must have listed these out wrong initially. If I go GFK, G to F to K, corresponds with LKF. Those were my alternate interior angles, so that's our reason. And then we have our shared side. KF, and you might have KF congruent to KF or FK congruent to FK. That's okay, right? In previous years when we had more time to spend on this, I was a little bit pickier about the order. I haven't been so much currently, okay? Still reflexive property, and then last step, triangles are congruent. All right, last one on here. A segment has a midpoint at 1, 1. And an endpoint at 3, -4. Our job is to find this point here, and I know the answer is there for you, but that's our goal. And how do we get to that 5, -2? Think about how you move. This length has to be the same as that length, this one and this one, right? So I'm going to write to the side here, if I have 1, 1, and I have -3, 4, movement-wise, to get from 1 to -3, I go back 4. So if I went back 4 from here to here, to maintain the distance on the other side, I'm going to go forward 4. 1 plus 4 is 5. And because it's a coordinate plane, 2-dimensional, we have to do that process twice. From 1 to 4, I add 3. Oops, let's do it over here. I add 3, so then to keep the same distance on the opposite side of my midpoint, I'm going to subtract 3. 1 minus 3 is -2. Okay, so there's lesson 4-2. Should be able to check that one off. The next page looks like this. Draw your picture, right? If we want an included angle between GM and MT, mark those. What angle is in between? Where do they connect at? Angle M. if I want to know which sides include a certain angle. So on number 2, I want angle T to be included. Which two sides come together at T? MT and GT. And then we're going to look at what angle is included between GT and MG. So now I'm looking at GT, the green if you can tell the color on here, and GT and MG. They come together at G. Okay. On these, you need to decide side, 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 or side angle side, right? Or NEI. This first one, I have two sides and an angle, but is the angle in the right spot? If I trace out this segment and this segment, they connect at J. That's the angle that would need to be marked. We don't have enough information. This one I can mark shared side. So then I have side angle side. 6, I can also mark the shared side. That would be an example of side, side, side. Okay. Next set. Try to keep the answers covered. We can mark the shared side, but again, you have to think about, is your angle in the right spot? If I trace out 2 of the segments marked, they come together at Z. That is not the angle marked. That one's an NEI. Okay, angle is not in the right position. 8, side, side, side. 9, side, angle, side. It should be okay on those. Okay, this one. On 10, can we mark anything else? We can mark the shared side. I don't know if that was already marked on your paper or not. We have this pair of angles marked, and really, that's it. Nothing else that I can mark. That is not enough information. If you focus on one triangle like this one, I have a side and an angle. I need another piece of information, so not enough. 11, we can mark vertical angles, which gives me side, angle in the right spot, side. And on 12, you have side, side, side as is. You could mark your vertical angles and do side, angle, side. Okay. What other information do you need to prove the triangle is congruent by side, angle, side? And I know you can see the answers, but to explain, this would be my included angle if my sides are AB and CB. And then G would be the included angle on the other triangle, so I would need to know that they're congruent. 2 options for 14. If I use the mark segments, I could mark angle Z congruent to T, and that would give me side, angle, side. Or I could keep the angle, right, at Y, but I would need a different side marked. I would need XY congruent to RS, then I would have side, angle, side. The last one, if you have equilateral triangles, so all the sides are the same, right, individually on each one, and the angles are all 60, right? But, like on my example, all the sides are 2, this one they're all 4. They're both equilateral triangles. Are they congruent to each other? Not unless we know the sides on one equilateral triangle are congruent to the sides on another. They would always be similar, which we'll talk about later in the year, but they are not necessarily congruent. Okay, backside. Take your given, BC and DC. Mark it on your diagram if it's not. AC and EC. And then we have vertical angles. That looks like a side angle side. So, do we have any non-congruency in the given? Congruent symbol, congruent symbol. This will be a 4-step problem. We'll use side angle side. So first step, pair of segments. I'm going to use the BC and DC. It's given. Angles, my angles at C. Make sure you use 3 letters. So BCA, DCE. Those are vertical angles. That's your reason. And then my other pair of sides, AC and EC, are also given. And then triangles are congruent. All right, bottom one. Parallel. Again, make sure you think about that if you have parallel lines, alternate interior, corresponding. In this case, I have this lower angle at Z, upper at x. They are alternate interior. And then, what else do I have? Shared side at zx. And we were given wx and yz. So then I have a side, angle, side. Okay, setup. Non-congruency. Parallel is not a congruent symbol. That should be first in your proof. And all that means is then you have 5 steps, right? If you have some non-congruency, you have an extra step in there. Pair of segments, I'm going to use wx and yz because it's given. I can handle that. Angles. We marked our alternate interior angles. Careful of how you label them. If I do z first, it'd be y to z to x. And then if I do x, wxz. I guess I have wxz first. But they're alternate interior, so that's your reason. And don't make these more complicated than they need to be. And I know they're out of your comfort zone, right? Doesn't mean you can't handle it, okay? And then we have xz congruent to xz. If you wrote it that way, or zx congruent to zx, that's fine. I have mine flipped. Again, I was pickier about order in previous times. Reflexive property, and then last step, triangles are congruent. Okay? We are going to go over 4.3 as well. So let's do that. All right. So first one, side, angle, side, happening on both, side, angle, side. This one we can mark vertical angles, but I have angle, angle, angle. That is not one of our options. These are our only options. On 3, I can mark a shared side, and it looks like I might have side, angle, side. The angle is not in the right spot. Okay, if I was going to use side, angle, side, I would need this angle, so not enough information. And then on 4, those arrows mean parallel. That means we can mark alternate interior, and since we have 2 sets of arrows, I can mark 2 sets of alternate interior, which gives me angle, side, angle. Okay. All right, these we set up in class as well, and then you were trying to try and fill them out. So let's see how you did. Check your answers against mine. We determine angle, angle, side. So first step, pair of angles. This pair of angles right here. And then we have a pair of segments. Oh, angle, angle, side. Let's do the other angle. The vertical angles, and then my pair of sides, LM and NM, which are given. And then the triangles are congruent. Okay. This one, angle A and B are right angles. AE bisects BD. Right angles, we got those. Bisect split in half, so mark BC and DC. And then we have vertical angles. Excuse me. Okay, so this one, angle, side, angle. First step, your non-congruency from the given. Second step, we need a pair of angles. We have angle A and B. This should be D. We'll fix that. Okay. And this one is probably new. There's a right angle congruence theorem, which states all right angles are automatically congruent. Okay, no matter what, if you have 2 right angles, we can say they're congruent. So that one's probably new. Fix if you need to fix. And then BC congruent to DC because of the bisector. And then we have our vertical angles, right? Make sure you use 3 points to name those vertical angles. And then the triangles are congruent. Okay. All right. This one, angle E and H congruent. HFG, EGF are congruent. We can mark our shared side. Gives me an angle, angle, side. Again, we did the setup in class. Now we'll see if you can fill in the proof. There is no non-congruency in the given. That is a congruent symbol. Congruent symbol means we're going to use 4 steps. First one, I know angle E is congruent to angle H because that was given right here. Second step, another pair of angles. HFG and EGF, they're congruent because that was given. And then we have our shared side, which is just reflexive. Again, you might have GF congruent to GF or FG congruent to FG. That is perfectly fine. And then last step, triangles are congruent. Okay, backside. This one, flow proof, statements in the box, reasons go below. So when we look at it, we're told that segment AB is perpendicular to BL. That's given. KL perpendicular to BL, given. When you have perpendicular lines, they intersect at 90, okay? Which is called a right angle. So my next step, how do I know angle B is a right angle? Because the two segments that connect to form it are perpendicular. So definition of perpendicular. Same thing at angle L. And then this is one of those right angles one again. Since B and L are both right angles, they have to be congruent. All right angles are congruent. Angle 1 and 2, how did we know they're congruent? That was given. AB and KL, right here, was also given. And then we have to think about why the triangles are congruent. So I have an angle, another angle, and then a side, so angle, angle, side. All right, 9, given MN parallel to OP and MP parallel to ON. So this one, again, you have two sets of parallel sides. If you have two sets of parallel sides, there are two alternate interior that we can mark congruent. There's one pair. And then based on these two sides being parallel, I can mark these angles, right? They're up against the parallel side. And then I have my shared side. So that gives me angle, side, angle. First step, your non-congruency. Okay? So MN parallel to OP, MP parallel to ON. Angle NMO congruent to angle POM. Those are alternate interior angles. NMO would be the upper angle at M and the lower angle at O. And then our shared side, MO, and again, you might have MO congruent to MO, that's fine, reflexive. And then angle NOM congruent to angle PMO. Those are the pink angles that I have marked on the diagram. And then last step, triangles are congruent. Okay, last one. On our diagram, we want angle A congruent to angle D, AC congruent to DC, and then we can mark our vertical angles. So this looks like an angle, side, angle. And then we walk through it. In my given, there isn't any non-congruence, right? No bisector, no midpoint, no parallel. So this is a 4-step proof. How do I know A and D are congruent? It was given. How do I know segment AC and DC are congruent? It was given. And then my vertical angles, BCA, again, make sure you use 3 letters. Angle ECD, vertical angles. And last step, triangle ABC congruent to triangle DEC by angle, side, angle. Okay? If after watching this you haven't turned in, like you have missing assignments from this, make sure you submit them in classroom. Okay? All right. Have a good day. Talk to you later.